The rope burns on Zara Sullivan's wrists were still raw when she heard the cell door clang open. But it was not freedom that walked through, only another lawyer with tired eyes and emptier promises. She had been locked in the Dalhart jailhouse for 3 weeks now, accused of a crime she did not commit. And every day the walls seemed to press closer while the Texas heat turned the small cell into an oven. Outside, dust devils spun through the streets of this frontier town in the summer of 1882. And somewhere beyond these iron bars, her father's ranch was falling apart without her to manage it. The lawyer told her the trial was postponed again, that Judge Cornelius Blackthorne wanted more time to review the evidence. But Zara knew delays meant something else entirely in a town where justice wore a price tag. She had been riding back from Amarillo with the ranch payroll when 3 men ambushed her on the open road. They took the money and left her unconscious in the dirt, but when the sheriff found her hours later, he accused her of staging the robbery herself. The supposed witnesses were men she had never seen before, their testimonies bought and paid for by someone who wanted her land. Her father had died 6 months earlier, leaving her the Sullivan Ranch, 3,000 acres of prime grazing land that sat on a newly discovered water source. In a region where drought could kill a herd in weeks, that water was worth more than gold, and plenty of men would do anything to possess it. Owen Ashford had been trailing cattle from Colorado to the railhead in Dodge City when he heard about the woman in the Dalhart jail. He was 26 years old, tall and broad-shouldered from years of hard work, with dark hair that touched his collar and eyes the color of storm clouds. He had a reputation as a fair man who did not tolerate cheaters or liars, and he had crossed paths with corrupt lawmen before. Something about the story bothered him as he sat in the saloon nursing a whiskey, listening to the locals gossip about how Miss Sullivan would hang for sure, or maybe just rot in that cell until she agreed to sign over her property. The bartender, an old-timer named Cal, leaned in close and said the real crime was not what she was accused of but what Judge Blackthorne was doing behind closed doors. Owen set his glass down with a solid thunk. "What do you mean?" Cal glanced around to make sure no one was listening too close. "Word is the judge told her lawyer that for $10,000 he would make the charges disappear. Said she could walk free and keep her ranch, but only if she paid up. Problem is, she does not have that kind of money. Her father spent everything digging wells and buying cattle before he passed." The whiskey turned bitter in Owen's mouth. He had seen plenty of injustice in his years riding the frontier, but a judge holding a woman hostage for money made his blood run hot. "Who is trying to take her land?" Garrett Morrison, that big rancher from the north. "He has been buying up every property between here and the New Mexico border. The Sullivan place is the last piece he needs for a straight run to market." Cal wiped down the bar with a dirty rag. "Judge Blackthorne is Morrison's cousin by marriage. You do the arithmetic." Owen stood up, his decision made before he fully understood why. Maybe it was because he had lost his own mother to men who valued money over human decency. Or maybe it was because he believed some lines should never be crossed. Either way, he was not about to let another corrupt official destroy an innocent life. "I need to see her lawyer." The lawyer, a nervous man named Philip Henderson, met Owen in his cramped office above the general store. Papers were stacked everywhere, and the man looked like he had not slept in days. When Owen explained why he was there, Henderson's expression shifted from suspicion to desperate hope. "You want to help Miss Sullivan? Why, you do not even know her." "I know enough," Owen said. "I know she is innocent and the judge is crooked. That is all I need to know." Henderson rubbed his face with both hands. "Even if we expose Blackthorne, Morrison has half this town in his pocket. The sheriff, the mayor, most of the businessmen. They all profit when he profits. Then we do not expose him in this town. Owen leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. We take it higher. The territorial marshal is in Santa Fe. If we can get evidence of the bribery, we can bring federal charges. How do you propose we get that evidence? The judge is not going to confess, and without proof, it is just our word against his. Owen smiled, but there was no humor in it. Let me talk to Miss Sullivan first, then we will figure out how to trap a rat. Getting into the jail was easier than expected. The deputy on duty was a young man who looked barely old enough to shave, and he accepted Owen's story about being a cousin from Colorado without much question. The kid led him down a narrow hallway that smelled of unwashed bodies and despair, then unlocked the cell at the end. "You have got 15 minutes, the deputy said before walking back to his desk. Zara was sitting on the thin mattress with her back against the wall, her dark hair hanging loose around her shoulders. She looked up when Owen entered, and he felt something shift in his chest at the sight of her. Even dirty and exhausted, she was beautiful, with high cheekbones and eyes so blue they reminded him of mountain lakes. But it was not her appearance that struck him. It was the strength he saw in the set of her jaw and the way she met his gaze without flinching. "Who are you?" Her voice was hoarse but steady. "Owen Ashford, I am here to help you." "I do not need help from strangers. I have a lawyer. Your lawyer cannot do what needs to be done." Owen pulled up the rickety stool and sat down, keeping his voice low. "I know about Judge Blackthorn's demand. $10,000 for your freedom. I know Morrison wants your land and the judge is in on the scheme." Zara's eyes widened slightly. "How do you know that? Does it matter? What matters is getting you out of here and making sure those men pay for what they have done." He paused, studying her face. "But I need you to trust me, even though you have got no reason to." She was quiet for a long moment, her fingers twisting together in her lap. "Why would you do this? You said yourself you are a stranger." "Because it is the right thing to do. Because I have seen what happens when corrupt men go unchecked, and I am tired of looking the other way." He held her gaze. "And because you deserve justice, Miss Sullivan." Something in his words must have reached her, because her shoulders relaxed slightly and she nodded. "What do you need from me?" "Everything you know about that day. Every detail, no matter how small." For the next 10 minutes, Zara told him about the ambush, describing the 3 men who had attacked her. She had been traveling alone, which was her first mistake, but the ranch hands had been busy with a difficult calving, and she had not wanted to pull them away. The robbers knew exactly when she would be on that road and exactly how much money she was carrying. They wore bandanas over their faces, but one of them had a distinctive scar on his left hand, shaped like a crescent moon. After they knocked her off her horse, she remembered waking up to find Sheriff Dawson standing over her, and his first words were not asking if she was hurt but accusing her of staging the robbery. "Dawson found you too quickly," Owen said, piecing it together. "He was probably watching to make sure the plan went smoothly." "But how do we prove any of this?" Zara's voice cracked with frustration. "It is my word against all of them. We get one of them to turn. The weakest link in any conspiracy is always someone who is scared of hanging." Owen stood up as he heard the deputy's footsteps approaching. "I will be back. Do not lose hope." The deputy appeared at the cell door, jingling his keys. "Time is up." Owen walked past him without a word, already forming a plan in his mind. He needed to find those 3 robbers, and he needed to make one of them talk. It was risky and possibly illegal, but he had not come this far to play by rules that were already rigged. He spent the next 2 days asking questions in the rougher saloons on the edge of town, buying drinks for drifters and hired guns, letting it slip that he was looking for men who might be interested in quick money. It was dangerous work because Morrison's people were everywhere, but Owen had learned how to blend in during his years on the trail. On the third night, his patience paid off. A man with nervous eyes and twitchy hands mentioned that he knew some fellows who had recently come into money, and they were spending it fast at a gambling house 2 towns over in Hartley. Owen rode through the night, covering the 30 miles before dawn. Hartley was even smaller than Dalhart, just a collection of buildings clustered around a crossroads. The gambling house was easy to find, a 2-story structure with peeling paint and the sound of shouting voices inside. He tied his horse to the rail and pushed through the doors. The air was thick with cigar smoke and the smell of cheap whiskey. Men crowded around poker tables, their faces gleaming with sweat in the lamplight. Owen scanned the room until he spotted them, 3 men in the corner playing faro with the kind of recklessness that came from sudden wealth. He watched them for an hour, noting which one was drinking the most, which one was losing money the fastest. That would be his target. The man's name was Charlie Prout, and by midnight he had gambled away most of his share of the robbery money. Owen followed him outside when he stumbled into the street, and before Charlie could react, Owen had him pressed against the alley wall with a knife at his throat. "I am going to ask you some questions, and you are going to answer them truthfully," Owen said, his voice calm and cold. "Lie to me, and you will regret it." Charlie's eyes went wide with terror. "I do not have any money left, I swear." "I do not want your money. I want to know about the woman you robbed 3 weeks ago on the road from Amarillo." The color drained from Charlie's face. "I do not know what you are talking about." Owen pressed the knife a fraction closer. "You and 2 others ambushed Zara Sullivan and stole the ranch payroll. One of you has a scar on his hand shaped like a crescent moon. The sheriff was in on it, and so was Judge Blackthorne. Now you are going to tell me everything, or I am going to make sure Morrison knows you have been spending his money on cards and women." That last part was a guess, but it hit home. Charlie started talking so fast his words tripped over each other. Yes, they had been hired by Morrison to rob the Sullivan woman and make it look like she staged it herself. The sheriff was supposed to find her and arrest her, and the judge was supposed to make sure she could not prove her innocence. Morrison wanted her desperate enough to sell her ranch for pennies, but she had been more stubborn than expected. The judge had come up with the bribery scheme as a backup plan, figuring she would have to give up eventually. "How much did Morrison pay you?" Owen asked. "500 each." "We were supposed to get another 500 after she sold the ranch, but it has been taking too long and we needed money now." Charlie was shaking. "Please, mister, I just did what I was told. I got a family to feed." "You should have thought about that before you destroyed an innocent woman's life." Owen pulled back the knife but kept his grip on Charlie's collar. "Here is what you are going to do. You are coming back to Dalhart with me, and you are going to tell the territorial marshal everything you just told me. Morrison will kill me. Morrison is going to hang for corruption. But if you cooperate, maybe you will just spend some years in prison instead of swinging from a rope." Owen's voice softened slightly. "You made a bad choice, Charlie. Now you have got a chance to make a better one." It took 2 more hours of persuading, but Charlie finally agreed. Owen tied his hands and put him on a horse, and they rode back to Dalhart as the sun climbed over the horizon. Owen did not take him to the local jail. Instead, he went straight to the telegraph office and sent an urgent message to the territorial marshal in Santa Fe, explaining the situation and requesting immediate assistance. The response came back within hours. Marshal Thomas Whitfield was already in the region investigating reports of land fraud, and he would arrive in Dalhart by evening. Owen kept Charlie hidden in a storage room at the stable, paying the owner extra to keep his mouth shut. Then he went to find Philip Henderson and explain what he had done. The lawyer's hands trembled as he read the telegraph from the marshal. "This could actually work," Henderson whispered. "With Charlie's testimony and the marshal's authority, we can bypass the local corruption entirely." "We need to move fast before Morrison figures out what is happening," Owen said. "Can you get a message to Miss Sullivan? I want her to know help is coming." Henderson nodded. "The deputy who let you see her, he is my wife's nephew. He is a good kid, just scared of losing his job. I will have him tell her." Marshal Whitfield arrived just after sunset, a grizzled man in his 50s with iron gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. Owen met him at the hotel and laid out everything he had learned. Whitfield listened without interrupting, occasionally making notes in a small leather journal. When Owen finished, the marshal sat back in his chair and studied him. "You took a big risk, Ashford. Kidnapping a witness, even a guilty one, could have landed you in jail." "I know. But sometimes you have to break small rules to stop bigger crimes." Whitfield's mouth twitched in what might have been approval. "I have been tracking Morrison's land dealings for 3 months. He has forced at least a dozen families off their property using similar tactics. But I have never had a witness willing to testify. If your man Charlie holds up under questioning, we can finally nail him." "What about Judge Blackthorne? Judicial corruption is a federal offense. If we can prove he demanded money for Miss Sullivan's release, he will lose his position and face criminal charges." Whitfield stood up. "Let me talk to your witness. If his story checks out, I will have Miss Sullivan released tomorrow and start arresting the conspirators." Owen felt relief wash over him for the first time in days. "Thank you, Marshal. Do not thank me yet. We still have to get through this without Morrison starting a range war." Whitfield grabbed his hat. "Men like him do not go down easy." The interrogation of Charlie Pruitt took place in the hotel room, away from the courthouse where Morrison's allies could interfere. Marshal Whitfield was thorough and methodical, asking the same questions multiple ways, looking for inconsistencies. Charlie stuck to his story, providing details that could be verified and naming names. By midnight, Whitfield was satisfied he had enough evidence to act. The arrests began at dawn. Marshal Whitfield, backed by 2 federal deputies who had arrived overnight, went first to Judge Blackthorne's house. Owen insisted on being there, though he stayed back and let the lawmen do their work. The judge answered the door in his nightshirt, his face going from annoyed to panicked when he saw the badges. "On whose authority do you barge into my home?" Blackthorne blustered. "United States Marshal Thomas Whitfield. You are under arrest for extortion, bribery, and conspiracy to commit fraud. You have the right to remain silent, though I doubt you will." Whitfield's voice was iron. "We have a witness who will testify that you demanded $10,000 from Zara Sullivan in exchange for dismissing false charges against her." "That is absurd. I have never done any such thing. Your correspondence with Garrett Morrison tells a different story. We also have Charlie Pruitt in custody, and he has been very forthcoming about the entire scheme." Whitfield nodded to his deputies. "Take him." Owen watched as they led the judge away in shackles, and he felt a grim satisfaction. One down, several more to go. Sheriff Dawson was arrested an hour later while trying to flee town. He had gotten word that the federal marshals were in Dalhart, and he made the mistake of running instead of trying to bluff his way through. They caught him 5 miles outside of town with saddlebags full of money, which only made him look more guilty. Garrett Morrison was the hardest to find because he had fortified his ranch north of town with hired guns. Marshal Whitfield was not intimidated. He rode out there with a dozen deputized citizens, including Owen, and served the warrant in front of Morrison's entire crew. Morrison was a big man in his 50s with a handlebar mustache and cold eyes. He stood on his porch and glared at the marshal. "You are making a mistake, Whitfield. I have friends in high places." "Your friends can visit you in prison," Whitfield said calmly. "Garrett Morrison, you are under arrest for conspiracy, fraud, theft, and attempted extortion. Your operation is finished. You cannot prove anything. We have got a witness, financial records, and telegraph messages between you and Judge Blackthorne. We have more than enough." Whitfield gestured to his men. "Anyone who interferes with this arrest will be charged as an accessory. I suggest you all stand down." Morrison's hired guns looked at each other, weighing their options. They were tough men, but they were not stupid. Going up against federal marshals was a good way to end up dead or in prison. One by one, they lowered their weapons and stepped back. Morrison's face turned purple with rage, but there was nothing he could do. They took him into custody without a shot being fired. Owen rode back to Dalhart with the prisoner convoy, his heart lighter than it had been in weeks. The corruption had been cut out like a cancer, and now the healing could begin. But there was one more thing he needed to do, one more person he needed to see. Zara was released from jail that afternoon. Owen was there when Marshal Whitfield personally unlocked her cell and apologized on behalf of the law for what she had endured. She stepped out into the sunlight, blinking like someone waking from a nightmare. Her eyes found Owen in the crowd, and the gratitude in her expression made his throat tight. "You did this," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "You saved me." "I just helped set things right," Owen replied. "You saved yourself by staying strong." They stood there in the dusty street, and Owen realized he did not want to leave. He had been drifting for so long, moving from one cattle drive to another, never putting down roots. But looking at Zara Sullivan, seeing the strength and grace in her despite everything she had suffered, he felt something shift inside him. Maybe it was time to stop running. Maybe it was time to stay. "I should go check on my ranch," Zara said, but she did not move. "I do not even know what condition it is in after all this time." "Would you like some company?" Owen asked. "I am pretty good with cattle and fence repairs." A smile touched her lips, the first real smile he had seen from her. "I would like that very much." They rode out to the Sullivan Ranch together, and Owen felt his breath catch at the sight of it. The land stretched out in rolling waves of grass and scrub brush, with the distant mountains painted purple against the sky. The ranch house was modest but well built, with a wide porch and sturdy corrals. The cattle were scattered across the pastures, more than he had expected. Someone had been looking after them, and Zara explained that her father's old foreman had stayed on even when he could not be paid. Tom Grayson was a weathered man in his 60s who greeted Zara with tears in his eyes. "Miss Zara, thank the Lord you are free. We heard about the arrests this morning. Whole town is talking about that cowboy who brought down Morrison." "This is Owen Ashford," Zara said. "He is the reason I am standing here." Tom shook Owen's hand with a grip that was still strong. "Then you are welcome here any time, son. We owe you a debt we can never repay." "I do not want repayment," Owen said, "but I could use work if you are hiring." "I am good with horses and cattle, and I am not afraid of hard labor." Zara and Tom exchanged glances. "We cannot pay much," Zara admitted. "Not until we sell the spring calves. Money has been tight." "Room and board is payment enough for now," Owen said. "The rest we can figure out later." So Owen Ashford became a ranch hand at the Sullivan Ranch, and the days turned into weeks. He worked from dawn until dusk, mending fences and breaking horses, helping Tom move the cattle to better grazing. The work was hard but satisfying, and every evening he ate dinner at Zara's table. They talked about everything and nothing. sharing stories of their pasts and dreams for the future. Owen learned that she was 23 years old, that she had grown up on this land and loved it with a fierce devotion. Her mother had died when she was young, and her father had raised her to be tough and capable, teaching her how to run a ranch when most women were learning needlepoint. Zara learned that Owen was the youngest of 4 brothers, that he had left home at 16 after his mother's death, and never looked back. He had worked on ranches all over the West, never staying long enough to form real attachments. But there was something about this place, about her, that made him want to stay. The attraction between them grew slowly, built on shared work and mutual respect. Owen found himself watching her when she thought he was not looking, admiring the way she sat a horse and the determination in her eyes when she talked about rebuilding the ranch. Zara caught herself thinking about him at odd moments, remembering the way he had risked everything to save her, the quiet strength in his voice when he had promised help was coming. One evening in late August, they were sitting on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and red. The heat of the day was fading, replaced by a cool breeze that smelled of sage and dust. Owen was repairing a bridle and Zara was shelling peas for dinner, but neither of them was really focused on the task. "Can I ask you something?" Zara said finally, breaking the comfortable silence. "Anything. Why did you really help me? You could have ridden on to Dodge City and never looked back. You did not owe me anything." Owen set down the bridle and looked at her. "At first, I told myself it was about doing the right thing, about standing up to corruption, and that was true, but it was not the whole truth." "What was the whole truth?" "The moment I heard about you, about what they were doing to you, I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Like I needed to act, like I could not just walk away." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "And then I met you and I saw how strong you were, even locked in that cell. I saw someone worth fighting for." Zara's hand stilled in her lap. "Owen, I know it is too soon," he said quickly. "I know you have been through hell, and the last thing you need is some drifter cowboy complicating your life. But I want you to know that I am not planning on leaving, not unless you want me to." She set aside the bowl of peas and moved closer to him on the bench. "What if I do not want you to leave? What if I want you to stay?" The hope in her eyes made his heart race. "Then I will stay as long as you will have me." They sat there as the sun disappeared below the horizon and the stars began to emerge, not quite touching but close enough to feel the warmth of each other. It was a beginning, fragile and uncertain, but it was theirs. The territorial court tried Judge Blackthorne, Sheriff Dawson, and Garrett Morrison in September. The proceedings took place in Santa Fe with a circuit judge brought in from Denver to ensure fairness. Owen and Zara traveled there to testify, and it was the first time they had left the ranch since he started working there. The city felt crowded and noisy after the open spaces they were used to, but they were there for an important purpose. Zara's testimony was powerful and clear. She described the ambush, the false accusations, the weeks in jail, and the judge's demand for money. The courtroom was silent as she spoke, and Owen could see the jury members leaning forward, hanging on every word. When the prosecutor asked her how she survived those weeks locked up, she looked directly at Owen. "I held on to hope," she said. "And then someone showed me that hope was not foolish." Owen testified next, explaining how he had tracked down Charlie Pruitt and convinced him to confess. The defense attorney tried to make it sound like he had coerced the testimony through violence, but Marshal Whitfield backed up Owen's account, stating that Pruitt had been treated fairly and had cooperated voluntarily. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records showed money flowing from Morrison to the judge and sheriff. Telegraph messages detailed the conspiracy. Charlie Prout and the other two robbers all testified in exchange for reduced sentences. The verdict came after only 2 hours of deliberation. Guilty on all counts. Judge Blackthorne was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. Sheriff Dawson got 10 years. Garrett Morrison, as the architect of the scheme, received 20 years and had all his assets seized to compensate his victims. The courtroom erupted in applause, and Owen saw tears streaming down Zara's face. He reached over and took her hand, squeezing gently. "It is over," he said. "You are free for real now." She turned to him, and in front of everyone in that courtroom she kissed him. It was not a long kiss or a passionate one, just a gentle press of lips that held all the gratitude and affection she could not put into words. When they pulled apart, Owen was smiling. "We should probably get out of here before we cause a scandal," he murmured. They left Santa Fe the next morning and rode back to Dalhart at an easy pace, taking their time to enjoy the journey. They camped under the stars one night, and as they sat by the fire, Zara told Owen about her dreams for the ranch. She wanted to expand the herd, improve the bloodlines, maybe even start breeding horses. Owen listened and added his own ideas, and they talked until the fire burned down to embers. "I never thought I would have this," Zara said softly. "A future that feels possible, someone to share it with." "You deserve every good thing this life has to offer," Owen replied. "And I intend to spend my days making sure you get them." She moved closer, resting her head on his shoulder. "I love you, Owen Ashford. I think I started falling for you that first day in the jail cell when you looked at me like I was worth saving." His arm came around her, holding her close. "I love you too, Zara Sullivan, more than I ever thought I could love anyone." They returned to the ranch in October, just as the weather started to cool and the leaves on the cottonwood trees turned gold. Tom Grayson took one look at them and grinned. "About time you two figured it out. I was starting to think I would have to knock your heads together." Owen laughed. "We were taking it slow." "Well, do not take it too slow. I am not getting any younger, and I would like to see some little ones running around this place before I am too old to teach them how to rope." Zara blushed, but did not deny the possibility. That night, alone in the ranch house, she and Owen talked about the future more seriously. Marriage was not something to be entered into lightly, especially on the frontier where survival required partnership as much as love. But they both knew what they wanted. "I do not have much to offer you," Owen said. "No land, no money saved up. Just a good horse, a strong back, and a promise that I will work every day to make you happy." "That is more than enough," Zara replied. "This ranch is half yours already as far as I am concerned. You helped save it. You have worked it. You belong here. Marry me then," he said, taking her hands in his. "Let's build this life together officially. Let's make this place something special." "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I will marry you." They were wed in November in the small church in Dalhart, with half the town in attendance. The community had rallied around Zara after the truth about her arrest came out, and many people who had shunned her during the trial now felt ashamed of their silence. The wedding was their way of making amends, and Zara accepted their support with grace. She wore a simple white dress that had belonged to her mother, and Owen wore a new suit that Tom had insisted on buying for him. Marshal Whitfield traveled from Santa Fe to attend, and he told Owen privately that he had a standing offer to become a deputy if he ever wanted steady law enforcement work. "I appreciate that, Marshal, but my place is here now," Owen said. "This ranch, this woman, this life. It is everything I never knew I wanted." Whitfield clapped him on the shoulder. "Then you are a lucky man, Ashford. Take care of her, always." The first year of marriage was not easy. The ranch was still recovering financially, and there were debts to pay off from the legal fees and lost time. Owen and Zara worked themselves to exhaustion, rising before dawn and collapsing into bed long after dark. But it was good work, meaningful work, and they were doing it together. In the spring, they sold the calves for a better price than expected, and suddenly there was a little breathing room in the budget. They hired 2 more ranch hands, young men eager to learn, and Tom was able to take on more of a supervisory role instead of doing all the heavy labor himself. By summer, the Sullivan Ranch was thriving. The cattle were healthy, the fences were strong, and the water source that had made the land so valuable was now supporting not just their operation but several neighboring ranches through carefully negotiated agreements. Zara proved to be as shrewd a businesswoman as she was a rancher, and Owen deferred to her judgment on the major decisions while handling the day-to-day operations. In August, Zara realized she was pregnant. She told Owen one evening after dinner, and the joy on his face made her laugh with delight. He picked her up and spun her around, then immediately set her down and apologized for being too rough. "I am not made of glass," she said, still laughing. "But yes, we are going to have a baby. When? Early March, I think. We will have a spring baby." Owen pressed his forehead to hers, his hands gentle on her waist. "A family. We are going to be a family." The pregnancy was relatively easy, though the winter months were difficult as Zara's body changed and the work became harder. Owen was fiercely protective, taking on more of her tasks and insisting she rest when she clearly needed to. Tom was equally attentive, treating her like a daughter and making sure the ranch hands did not slack off just because the boss was expecting. Their son was born on March 10, 1884, during a late-season snowstorm that blanketed the ranch in white. The midwife from town barely made it through the drifts, and Owen spent the hours of labor pacing the porch like a caged animal. When he finally heard the baby's cry, he burst into the bedroom and found Zara exhausted but smiling, holding a tiny bundle wrapped in a blanket. "We have a son," she said softly. "Owen, we have a son." He approached carefully, almost afraid to breathe, and looked down at the small red face of his child. The baby had a shock of dark hair and was wailing with impressive volume. Owen reached out one finger and gently touched the tiny hand, marveling when the infant's fingers curled around his. "He is perfect," Owen whispered. "You are amazing." They named him James William Ashford after both their fathers. Jamie, as they quickly started calling him, was a healthy baby with a strong pair of lungs. He kept them awake many nights those first few months, but neither Owen nor Zara minded. They took turns walking him around the house in the dark hours, singing soft songs and telling him stories about the ranch he would grow up on. Tom was absolutely smitten with the baby. He carved wooden toys and told Zara he was planning to teach Jamie how to ride as soon as the boy could walk. "Got to start them young," he insisted. "Make sure he is as good a horseman as his parents." As Jamie grew, the ranch continued to prosper. Zara managed the business side with skill, negotiating contracts and managing the books. Owen handled the cattle and horses, earning a reputation as one of the best horse trainers in the region. Together they built something that was more than just a successful ranch. It was a home, a legacy, a place where justice had prevailed and love had triumphed. On their 3rd wedding anniversary, they stood on the porch at sunset, watching Jamie toddle around the yard under Tom's watchful eye. The sky was painted in brilliant colors, and the land stretched out before them in endless promise. "You ever think about that day in the jail?" Zara asked, leaning against Owen's shoulder, how different things could have been. "Sometimes," he admitted. "If I had just ridden on to Dodge City, if I had not stopped in that saloon and heard about you, we never would have met. And my life would have been so much emptier." He turned to face her, his hands on her shoulders. "Everything I have, everything I am now, started the moment I decided to help you. Best decision I ever made." Zara smiled and pulled him down for a kiss. "Best thing that ever happened to me was you walking into that cell and telling me not to lose hope. You saved my life in every way that matters." "We saved each other," Owen corrected. "You gave me a reason to stop drifting, to put down roots. You gave me a home." They stood there together as the sun disappeared and the stars emerged, their son's laughter ringing across the yard. The corruption that had nearly destroyed them was gone, replaced by something clean and true. The ranch was thriving, their family was growing, and the future stretched out before them full of possibility. Years passed in the rhythm of ranch life. Jamie grew into a strong, curious boy who followed his father everywhere and hung on his grandfather Tom's every word. When he was 5, they gave him a pony and he rode like he had been born in the saddle. Zara gave birth to a daughter 2 years after Jamie, a girl they named Clara Rose, who had her mother's blue eyes and her father's dark hair. Then another son, Daniel, who was quieter than his siblings but just as determined. The ranch expanded over the years. They bought adjacent land when it became available, always careful to deal fairly with their neighbors and never forgetting the lessons learned from Garrett Morrison's greed. Owen taught his children the value of hard work and integrity, while Zara made sure they understood the importance of education and business sense. Tom lived to see all 3 grandchildren grow into young adults, and he died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 78, content in the knowledge that the Sullivan Ranch was in good hands. On a warm evening in June of 1899, Owen and Zara sat on the same porch where they had shared so many conversations over the years. They were in their early 40s now, their hands rough from work and their faces lined by sun and wind. But the love between them had only deepened with time, growing stronger through all the challenges and triumphs they had faced together. Jamie was 25 now, managing the day-to-day operations of the ranch with his wife at his side. Clara was married to a good man from a neighboring ranch, and they were expecting their first child. Daniel was studying veterinary medicine in Austin, determined to bring modern animal care to the ranches of West Texas. "We did good," Zara said, watching the sunset paint the sky. "Look at what we built." Owen took her hand, his thumb rubbing over her knuckles in a familiar gesture. "We did better than good. We created something that will last beyond us, a place built on honesty and hard work instead of corruption and greed. Do you ever regret it?" Walking away from the life you had before, he looked at her, and the love in his eyes was as strong as it had been that first day in the jail cell. "Not for a single second. You are my home, Zara. You always have been." She leaned over and kissed him softly, a kiss that held 17 years of love and partnership. "And you are mine." As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, they sat together in comfortable silence, 2 people who had fought for justice and found love in the process. The ranch spread out before them, their children and grandchildren carrying on the legacy they had built. The corruption that had once threatened to destroy everything had been defeated, replaced by a life of meaning and purpose. It was not a fairy tale ending because life on the frontier was never easy or simple. But it was real and true and hard one, built on sacrifice and courage, and the decision one man made to stand up against injustice. Owen Ashford had learned the judge was demanding money for Zara Sullivan's freedom, and he had ended that corruption fast. In doing so, he had found not just justice but love, not just a cause but a home, and that, in the end, was the greatest victory of all.